everybody to the Tuesday edition of the Daily Cheat Sheet. And I want to thank Golan for noticing my amazing new haircut. Good job there, buddy.
I'm just going to point out that the last time I got a haircut, which was significantly larger amount of hair removed from my head, you said nothing. So now when I notice, I'm still not saying anything.
And to see our haircuts, go to our YouTube page and follow us and subscribe to the Daily Cheat Sheet. There's the plug. And I want to just thank everybody that's been following us and listening to us, especially on Truth Social. You've pushed us up in numbers to places a show like ours could only pray to go. If it wasn't for people from Truth, we wouldn't be hitting these numbers go on. So I think we owe a lot.
That's true, and we don't lean into the clickbait stuff. So it means we need people who really want to hear conversation and might not hear exactly what they already think. And weirdly, that is less rampant than it should be.
Yes, and the dude will not be joining us today, so it's us two solo, and tomorrow we have a fantastic guest. Her name is Julie Hamill. She's an amazing lawyer that has been fighting Gavin Newsom. You don't want to get on her bad side, especially in the state of California. With that being said, Golan, this is such a wonky story with Grok, the Pentagon signing up and giving Grok a contract. This is what people sort of get really confused about and angered sometimes about, is that you have Grok, which is Musk's company, obviously, and Musk slinging every single bow and arrow he can at this administration, except when they give him money.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I told you last week about the fact that I'm the lazy one in my marriage, and my computer comes with the Google built in, and it comes with ChatGPT built in. So I just used Google and ChatGPT. But my wife was like, I ain't falling for that. I'm using DuckDuckGo, and I'm using Grok. And she was using these two things over and over again. And then on a regular basis, and I'm not trying to disparage Grok, okay? I'm not trying to disparage anything at all. I'm just stating a fact. On a regular basis, she comes to me and she goes, can you run this one through ChatGPT? It just does a better job than Grok. So let's just begin with the fact that this is as I mentioned, the teenage rebel version of AI that's being handed over with a $200 million contract to the Pentagon. But even with that aside, let's look at the bigger, more glaring issue. I think it was about 2 weeks ago that Grok was calling itself Mecha Hitler. And that might be a bigger issue than it not being able to translate to Chinese quite as well as ChatGPT. I'm not kidding, by the way. I didn't make up Mecha Hitler, as Judah likes to point out. That sounds like something Golan would make up. That's what it really called itself. It went full Third Reich in a prompt, started praising Hitler like it was trying to win the Iron Cross. Right after that is when this government contract came through. Because, I don't know, nothing says national security to me like handing the Pentagon a bot that wakes up anti-Semitic. So as far as I'm concerned, when I saw that story, it was, to me, one of the scariest things you could possibly imagine, because you know that at a certain point, all of these systems are going to be mechanized and all of these systems are going to be running through AI. And all I need is the AI that every Tuesday likes to quote Mein Kampf. This is real scary stuff.
Well said. You know, look at X yesterday with Elmo, right? And listen, Elmo got hacked. And this is what we're talking about. Are these systems being put into play too early before they've been really tested to the max? We're not talking about the Department of Transportation. Mind you, Sean Duffy, great work with the Department of Transportation. I don't even want to use that because, okay, the Department of Agriculture. Like, beta test this on a department that is not in charge of defense.
Absolutely. Look, Men's not here today. But Men told us a story just a couple of days ago about how his BMW had self-driving, and he had to, at certain points, grab the wheel and fight the machine to say, don't turn me into that wall. Certain things need some more beta testing. And if you're going to go all the way by giving it this massive double $100 million contract, it better not be in the Pentagon that is meant to secure our country and also has purview over our weaponry. It just seems like such a mistake.
You know, I also find it incredibly interesting. On Friday, we made a conscious decision, and I said I'm not going to report on a rumor. And the rumor was going around all weekend long. And it's amazing. You brought this up yesterday, that these people are onto the third rumor. So you forget the first rumor. So Bongino is still at the White House. That was the reporting all weekend, was Patel and Bongino. We did not talk about that story on purpose because at that point it was a rumor. And I loved what you said yesterday because this is newsworthy type of stuff and nobody's reporting that news story. There's no retraction go on. They were wrong so far. Bongino's still there, Patel's still there, everybody's still there.
By the way, even if Bongino leaves, even if Patel leaves, they still can be wrong because they're not telling you news stories. That's the thing. You don't have to retract an accusation that's just thrown out from a stage as I'm just asking questions kind of scenario, as they seem to be doing over and over again. This is not a news story where it is something in a newspaper or even something that is being reported with a straight face saying, I have done research and here are the facts that I have uncovered. It's, I got a feeling, look no further than the conversation between Charlie Kirk and Megyn Kelly. Okay? Two people who, by the way, we've given a pass to because we were so concerned with what like Tucker was doing or what Bannon was doing and all these other people. But then I watched their whole conversation, which I hadn't done prior. And there's that whole section where Charlie's like, hey, so what do you think? Is he an asset? He's definitely an asset. So it's going to be either MI6 or Mossad or CIA. What do you think? And then Megyn Kelly's like, I think it's Mossad, and the audience cheers. And what is that based on?
Of course, you're referring to Turning Point USA.
I am, indeed.
Which is what we did not sort of bring up yesterday. Yesterday's show, as we were talking about all these things, we were talking in a sense about what went on this past week. And I think we did bring it up a little bit about Turning Point USA and that Charlie.
More than a little bit, but not about Charlie and Megyn.
Yeah. It sounds like a royal couple.
It certainly does. And they were acting just like the actual royal couple when they were on Oprah, just lying to everybody. Because Megyn, everything she said in that interview, and I like Megyn Kelly quite a bit, everything she said on stage at TPUSA, conjecture. There wasn't a moment where Charlie said, and how do you think that you can prove that? And then she was like, hang on a second, here's some briefs. None of that happened. In fact, Charlie, smart guy that he is, even said, as he was in the middle of making the accusations that people were cheering on, he then said, of course, I have no evidence to back this up, but, and then continued doing it. Right. And that's kind of the subterfuge way of saying, wink, wink, we all know what's going on, even though we don't have the receipts. They don't have to do a retraction later. Why? They were just chatting. It was just my opinion, all of that stuff. So yeah, retractions are for news. This is just rumor and conjecture and all the rest. And it's just leading everybody around by like the nose ring in a circus. That's it.
Listen, I think that's extremely well said. And this is the problem. We can't differentiate anymore between what is news and what's not news and what makes a news story. And it's becoming really difficult, especially in the pod sphere or even an event like Turning Point USA, which is a big pod convention, right? You have all the pod people there. You have all the influencers there. I was a little shocked that Gutfeld was there, being a Breitbart guy. But yesterday, Charlie Kirk, I guess on his show, brings up the fact that he got a call from President Trump sort of telling him to stand down. And so he said, I'm not going to be talking about the e-files anymore. And I'm thinking to myself, why would you? It's like it used to drive me nuts when Sean Hannity would say, this is my opening monologue. If you speak, that's your opening monologue. You don't need to tell us this is your opening monologue. It's like that movie Mickey Blue Eyes when he called the restaurant the La Trattoria, and Hugh Grant's like, that means it's the La Trattoria. But my point is, why would Charlie Kirk do something like that? What? I don't get it. And
you know why he did that, don't you, Judah?
No, do tell. I'm asking honestly.
I think it's quite clear that he was letting his audience know, you can count on me to be your guy who asks these questions and pushes against those who are not giving us the information that we want and those who are not revealing the names or whatever it is that they're trying to do. I'm still your guy. So I'm one of the good ones. Don't turn your barrels on me. I was specifically called by the president and asked not to do it. So now I've done my favor to Trump, but I've done it in such a way to let you know I didn't really want to stop, and I'm with you guys. And so that way he gets to continue letting the fire burn over here while he technically did the favor that Trump asked him to do, if Trump even asked him to do that favor. So for me, that's the most cynical version of it. It's like when a little kid says, "Oh, you're fat." And the mom's like, "Oh, apologize." And the kid goes, "I'm sorry, you're fat." It's like, no, that wasn't an apology.
I'm thinking about that because we were both fat kids.
Very true. Maybe we'll put some pictures up of us when we were younger up on Twitter.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. So thank you for that memory. I want to get a little bit to this autopen thing because I know everybody's discussing this, but there is something extremely terrifying about what's going on. Listen, I'm inclined. Kash Patel is a good man. Dan Bongino is a good man. Even Matt Gaetz came out defending Pam Bondi. There is, as I brought up, a lot of crap that they have to clean up. And this is why I keep on saying, is this the hill we want to die on? Because it's going to take years to clean up these initial organizations. And everybody trusted Kash and everybody trusted Bongino. And the amount and scope of cleanup on aisle FBI that they have to do is so much, Golan. I don't know where you start. You're looking at false reports. Everybody keeps on saying release the files. Remember what happened the last time files were released? We had the Steele dossier. We had 2 years of Mueller. We had constant impeachment calls. This is a very slippery, even Nikki Haley today calling for the release of the files. I found that to be grand from Nikki Haley. 2028 Haley and go on. So there has to be, I don't know how you maneuver this. I don't know how you clean up FBI and you have to pick your spots at this point.
Absolutely. Look, first of all, Nikki Haley calling for that. I think I pulled a muscle rolling my eyes at that one. But the thing you're talking about is the internal rot, that thing that we're always mentioning, which is like cleaning up the swamp, draining the swamp, all of that stuff. Look, there had been strides towards the cleanup. There have been moves in the right direction, but it goes so deep. And there are so many people, by the way, even newly in the administration. So it's not just the people who have been there for a very long time who are entrenched and have been waiting like succubuses to continue to take advantage and screw things up from the inside. There are people who are new in the administration who are now weaponizing that stuff as well. And to me, that's actually a little scarier because the one thing we kept saying is that Trump, this time around, he knows better. Last time he got thwarted left and right because all of the people on the inside were trying to sabotage his deals and trying to do everything to push him in the wrong direction. This time he knew better. So he was going to put together a cabinet that was airtight. And then he brought in Tulsi Gabbard and J.D. Vance was his VP. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm necessarily picking on those people in particular. They just happen to be two people that I don't trust as much as I could. And J.D. Vance, actually, I like a lot. I think he's an incredibly smart guy. I think he is an incredibly smart player in the game, let's say. And I think, though, that because of his isolationist tendencies, he leans closer to Tucker than I would like. And I feel like every time his voice is heard, it is a voice that I am not appreciating on the world stage. I think there is something missing there.
I can't believe I'm about to pull a mend and defend J.D. Vance.
I could probably defend J.D. Vance too.
No. The reason I'm going to is...
There's no corridor that gets me about him, but I'd love to hear your take.
The reason I'm going to... This is it. First of all, I hated that his family was essentially doxxed at Disneyland. It's absolutely disgusting, and I love the image of him.
But that has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
No. That wasn't what I was going to say. In the past, for the most part, presidents and vice presidents don't always get along. They don't always share the same ideology. It's always been, this is, I mean, Bush and Reagan, very different on taxes, obviously. We could go back.
I'm sorry. I have to interrupt you. 1 second, and then I'll let you continue. There's a reason why that is. It's because most of the time the vice president is selected because they need a certain territory that vice president is going to fulfill that they can't, right? It's like, again, I'm a screenwriter. So for me, I always say the ally to the hero has certain traits that the hero does not possess, right? Shrek hates everybody. Donkey wants to be friends with everybody, that sort of thing. And so you have no choice but to pick this guy you don't like very much. You hold your nose, but you know he's going to win you XYZ, Nebraska, whatever, right? Here, that's not what happened. Trump took his schlong out, slammed it on the table, and said, I can even pick a guy who's kind of like me, and you're still going to bring me into office. Otherwise, it would have been Rubio, right? And so it wasn't him saying, I'm going to deliberately bring in more Latinos, or I'm going to deliberately bring in this other group. He said, I don't care. I'm enough. And you're going to get another guy that kind of looks like me, and here we go. So the idea that he had to hold his nose, pick J.D. Vance, he didn't. He did it deliberately, which is why they shouldn't have the kind of daylight that most presidents and vice presidents have. That's it. Your turn.
But that's sort of your take on it. Others might say he was brought in for the Midwest, even though he was underwater in those certain states. But again, I say this, Golan, he did have the best second debate and first debate with Walz, which I really think, when you look at the trends, that's when the trends polling wise really started to shift, was after that second debate, after the first, I say the second debate, referring to Trump had the first debate, and then J.D. Vance went next, and he really was crystal clear. I mean, there was such a huge thing between him and Walz on stage.
Fine, but you do have to admit that Walz didn't need any help. He was tripping over his own shoelaces and falling face first into a pile of manure without anybody's help. I'm just a knucklehead, and I don't really know how to tell the truth. I think his performance was on him as much as it was on J.D. Vance.
100%, but there were I know, but he used lines like common sense. He used lines about what happened when we listened to experts. He was exceptionally compelling, especially people that came in later on. Remember, there were a lot of people that came in later on into this. When you look at the Rogans, they didn't come in and support him right away. So this was a last big 3-week push. And I want to give J.D. Vance credit. And we still don't know a lot about J.D. Vance's credits. We don't know a lot about his views. Again, I don't want to get into the rumor. I don't want to get into the speculation. And that's exactly where we are. But getting back to the autopen, the reason I think this is such a big story is because it is so symbolic of everything wrong that has been done in the last 10 years, starting from when Trump walked off the escalator. The autopen was like sort of signing off on corruption.
Absolutely. You know, considering that we know that the autopen was being used for pardons on a regular basis, and literally it's a robotic arm like in some sci-fi fantasy movie, why wouldn't it also be used to sign off on any number of other things? Just like one man couldn't have signed all of those pardons, or at least one man in Biden's state of mind, why not have a bunch of other stuff that the autopen is taking care of? How about lawfare? Think of all the lawsuits. I think at a certain point there was a meeting within the White House in which Biden basically said anything, or whoever was in charge, said anything that we can get on this guy, anything we can sue him over, find anything, and you know what? You don't have to bring it to me. If it's something you can throw a lawsuit into some court, just have the robot arm sign off on it. We're good to go. And then, that way you don't have to wake me up. I'll be sleeping by 10:30 a.m. And so just boom, 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 that robotic arm just going to town. And I think it's a serious thing. I mean, I'm making a little bit of light of it, but this is something that basically was like, who is in charge? Who is actually taking care of the country? Because if things like this were being signed off on, who knows what else was being signed off on by this autopen? And we know already that his chief of staff, that his wife, that his son, that other people within the administration were taking advantage of this guy who basically was mentally gone. So who knows what else the robot arm was taking care of for the country.
So which brings to the bigger point again is, I get that the e-files were promised, and I get that the e-files, and I don't ever want to make it sound like we're poo-pooing people's wanting to find the truth on a subject that neither of us, let's be honest, finds to be that important for us. But it is important to a lot of people.
I just want to clarify what he means by that. It's not that we don't think it's important to find justice for the victims. It's not that we don't think it's important to hold perpetrators to account. It's not that we don't think that a client list, should it exist, should be exposed to the public and those people be held accountable for their actions. None of that is what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that if we are serious about what's going on with MAGA, what's going on with Trump's presidency, and it's not just about Trump's presidency, it's about the future. If we don't hold on to the White House, hold on to the Senate, hold on to the House, in the future, we are not going to be able to implement the things we want to implement. We're not going to be able to drain the swamp. We're not going to be able to accomplish a lot of the goals that we set for ourselves. And so right now, while everything else is going on, this is merely a distraction. And that's what we mean. It's not that we don't find it important. It's that we don't find it to be the only important thing. Now, many people have that as their mentality.
It's 100% right. And listen, look at what went on in the last 4 years with the DOJ with the weaponization of the DOJ, going after Trump over and over and over again. Obviously, Rand Paul going after Fauci. These are things I'm actually curious to know who was running, who was doing, that I find of utmost and so much national security issues than I do this other thing. So that's really my point on it, is there are so many more national security risks that we're avoiding. And the FBI does not have as many people as we think to do the investigations. And even when they do the investigations, go on, as we've witnessed, they've messed them up.
100%. And look, I don't want to go back and have the conversation about Epstein. We said we weren't going to have that conversation, but I just want to say one thing. I did something I haven't done in a little while. Matt Walsh has been on vacation. He came back from vacation. I listened to his podcast yesterday, and the entire opening of the podcast was about Epstein. And what he was doing was, first of all, I'm shocked to find that everything has changed while I was on vacation. And he laid out a case using clips to show how corrupt everything is, to show that they already said it was out there and now it's not out there. And I want to preface this by saying that unlike some of the other people out there that are genuinely bad actors, I think Matt Walsh, maybe it's my own bias, I think he's real. I think he's a genuine player. I think he's someone who actually feels this way. In any case, as he was going through it, one of the things that he kept coming back to and he kept hammering over and over and over again, he kept playing the clip, was Bondi. She was being interviewed, right? And she was asked, does the Epstein client list exist? And her response was, it's sitting on my desk right now to review. And he was like, there it is, right there. She said it is sitting on her desk. Now she has confirmed that it exists. And now you're telling us it doesn't exist. And there you go. It's a contradiction. And then later she was asked, hey, didn't you say that the client list was sitting on your desk? She said, no, what I meant was, the Epstein case files were sitting on my desk to review. I said I was going to review them. And ultimately what she said next was, then we reviewed them. And unfortunately, there wasn't a cool smoking gun. Like I thought I was going to deliver you the scandal of the century. And it turns out there's no there. I went through the files that were on my desk that I was intending to review. I'm saying this is what she claims. And it turns out there's no client list inside of it. In fact, not only does this sound plausible to me, I had never thought about it until I listened to Matt's show, and he was trying to convince me of the opposite, but managed to convince me that actually what she's saying makes more sense than her saying the client list is on my desk right now to review. It kind of doesn't even make sense if you think about it. So let's take it a step further. If you look at Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction, it actually doesn't state anything about co-conspirators. It doesn't state anything about clients or anything else. It literally is her being convicted of trafficking just a handful of young girls for Epstein himself. And the only people mentioned in the thing are Epstein, Maxwell, and the girls. And the girls testified against Maxwell and Epstein and nobody else. And nobody else is mentioned. So actually, maybe some of this is more plausible than we might think.
Did you know that before I sent you the...
No, actually, for whatever reason, I'd never gone back to look at what Maxwell's conviction was for. So when you sent it to me did you realize that no co-conspirators and no clients are mentioned anywhere in this thing? No other people are mentioned anywhere in her conviction? I was actually shocked. Because, of course, what I've been jammed into my ear holes on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's really important because I was curious about this. And I think it's important to be curious because everybody kept on bringing up Ghislaine Maxwell. And I was like, well, let me see this. And listen, the whole thing felt hanky from the start, especially with Mueller's daughter being one of the prosecutors. But neither here nor there, it was him. There was no co-conspirators. There was no anything. It was literally 4 victims testifying against Jeffrey Epstein. It wasn't for victims testifying against it. Not that that means anything, and not that that means that there aren't other people on the list, but that is specifically what Ghislaine Maxwell went to prison for, because I was always curious why she wasn't able to work out a deal. I want to go back to this bot farm thing. We had spoken about a bot farm, and it's really important to bring it up. Bring up the bot farm story again.
Absolutely. So basically, when America and Israel were bombing the Iranian nuclear sites, what we saw was there was an entire network of Iranian-backed bots. They were called Storm 2035. 1,300 fake profiles from hundreds of bots. And what they were doing was posing as Scots and Brits and Americans and even Venezuelans. And they were doing this whole thing basically anywhere where they could try to interrupt Western civilization, anywhere where they could push back against the West. They were talking about Brexit betrayal, hashtag free Scotland, all these wedge issues, and they were doing it in English and in Spanish and in Persian, and all these sock puppet accounts basically designed to look local and look authentic. And when the bombs hit the nuclear sites, they went completely offline, dead. And 16 days later, the blackout went down and they reemerged post-internet disruptions thanks to bombs dropping, reemerged, but now their tone shifted dramatically. No more Scottish independence, no more Brexit, only anti-West and anti-Israel and pro-Iran messaging. That's it. They were showing a clear geopolitical agenda post-bombing run. And basically, 200 million people were reached by this network, and even a broader network for Iranian narratives in general. And that tells you something, because if this is basically one site, one bot farm, and it was reaching 200 million people, it really makes you think about what else is being pushed into your face as popular that is just a bunch of computers that are happening in Russia and China and North Korea and Iran and every other place where there's a bad actor trying to convince you of something that isn't true.
There's two different things you could take from that. So you look at somebody like Benny Johnson, and you look at his posts. I encourage everybody to do this, because I actually spent time doing this. Scroll through his X feed and see how many likes he gets on things, right? So he'll get 900, he'll get 2,000, he'll get 5,000. Epstein, 45,000. Mm-hmm. And that number jump algorithmically is a statistical impossibility. It's very difficult unless there's something else pushing, let's say, call it a bot. I don't want to say that for sure, because maybe it's it is an extremely popular thing. But you look at people like Jackson Hinkle, who are getting 100,000 likes on their X's, and now they're getting 9,000 or 8,000. They've lost 90,000 people. So it is very kooky going on.
Yeah, and also, you're talking about likes. How about views? How about the fact that most of his stuff, and some of it, by the way, good for him, 600,000 views, 55,000 views, 61,000 views. I'm just scrolling through 52,000, 36,000, 3.5 million views on the post that you're talking about on X. 3.5 million views. It was posted July 14th at 11:43 p.m. It is currently July 16th at what time? 3:45 p.m. So that's a little weird also. So even if we put aside the number of likes, the number of views is even more staggeringly, let's say algorithmically, but let's also say from a probability perspective, also super impossible.
That's what I was trying to get at. But I also wanted to get into, because before what I was sort of referring to was Hegseth pulling people from that convention overseas. If you could talk about that story a little bit, because I think it's extremely important, because he pulled them out because they were globalist shills in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. The event itself, the Aspen Security Forum, that alone already felt like a globalist kind of anti-American event anyway. So the fact that Hegseth now has decided to withdraw senior defense leaders from it actually feels like the correct thing to do. So if you're going to go to a place where you are essentially going to have to defend what America is doing, then I think maybe it's an event that's worth skipping. I would love to hear your take on this. Do you think that Hegseth is telling the truth when he feels like this is the evil of globalism kind of event, the disdain for our country, all the things that he said in his statement? Or do you think this was running cover?
No, I think I trust Pete Hegseth. There's something in me that has a full faith and trust. I know he's made mistakes, but who hasn't? I'm a former drunk, okay? And I always say there's a difference between being sick. This is a very 12-step word. There's a big difference between being sick and being bad, right? I don't believe he did bad acts. I don't think he was a bad actor. I think he was a sick actor during his drinking periods. So there's something about him I completely trust. And that's just my humble opinion. When I look at him, when I see him, I think this is a person that loves our country deeply and loves the world deeply. I look at Pete Hegseth as I look at a lot of us that we don't know. We're going day by day right now. This is like a new venture into the world as we deal with things that weren't dealt with, Golan, for 4 years. And he has to reassess the Ukraine situation. He's obviously had to reassess the Gaza situation, the Iran situation. These are all things. So even if he had texted something 30 days ago, 30 days later, a lot has changed. And so I look at him as a real honest broker. That's my
I agree with you. By the way, so far I haven't seen anything. Again, we could play the rumors all day, and enough people played those drums and got enough people to dance in their drum circle. But realistically, I was never feeling like this guy was bad news. I so far have felt that he's an honest player, and he's not wrong. Even if you take a step back and you remove yourself from a partisan perspective, the Aspen security event has always felt this way, has actually felt very globalist. It feels very much like an echo chamber. A lot of centrist thinking, which, look, I happen to be kind of a center-right type of guy, so I'm not anti-centrist thinking. But centrist thinking today is more like elite consensus thinking, in my opinion. It's not what centrist thinking used to be. And so I think when you're watching people favor kind of pro-NATO, climate, cooperation, all of these things that we already hear from the woke left on a regular basis, I feel like, yeah, why are we doing it? I was surprised that Trump was even having people go to begin with, because many of the participants in Aspen are critical of the Trump administration and actually blame the Trump administration for a lot of the problems in the world in general. So it felt like he was going to go there to a place where he was ideologically opposed and or have his people go there and just have to defend. And for me, we have enough of this already in the podcast sphere. We have enough of this in so many places. Do we really need it on the world stage as well? I just feel like this is the right move.
Isn't it interesting, by the way, that it's a very slow news day, it feels like. Obviously, it just feels like there's not a lot to talk about. And it's interesting how there was so much to talk about 2 days ago or a day ago or 4 days ago, because it was all geared towards one massive story. And nobody's really talking about his promises to arm Ukraine, which I think is a bold move. Again, like I said yesterday, I can't wait to see the reaction when that happens, when day 51 happens and they didn't listen to him, like the Ayatollahs didn't listen to him. And those are news stories that nobody's talking about for some reason. It's just a very weird, bizarre
But again, you say for some reason, you know the reason. The reason is they're trying to distract you. They're trying to make you not look at any of the wins, not look at any of the good stuff that's happening, not look at any of the promises made, promises kept, and deliberately focus your attention on just this one shiny object over here. So you're looking at the coin that I'm going to hide in your ear, while behind me, the diamond heist has happened, right? And this is literally everything that is being done by these dishonest players. So that's the reason why no one's talking about this stuff. Again, I go back to that video that it's like I can't shake it. The video I watched on CNN, where that guy at TPUSA said, if they don't give us the list, then I'll know that I can't trust Trump. And this is a MAGA guy at Turning Point saying he can't trust Trump because he didn't get the list that may not even exist. And everything else that has been handed to him through MAGA and everything else that MAGA is trying to accomplish just goes like Kaiser Soze at the end of The Usual Suspects, because nothing else matters except for this one issue. And for those of you who are on Truth Social, go look at the post I put up earlier today. I didn't name names, but I took someone to task who said, I am not a controlled asset. Why am I also thinking the same way Tucker's thinking? Go read my post about this, how controlled assets know they are working for somebody, but people who think that they have developed their own opinions don't realize the manipulation that is being put into their head every second of every day, especially if you're on the internet. And so you may not think you're a controlled asset because you are not working on behalf of, but you are, and I hate to use this phrase because it sounds bad, but I mean it in the like Jean Le Carré, like espionage way. You are literally what is known as a useful idiot because you think it's your idea, and yet you are being used to further their cause.
I like that. And by the way, there were 7,000 people at the Turning Point USA event. This wasn't a 50,000 seater, and that's why I keep on saying we're not the left yet. Okay, this hasn't metastasized to full blown Zombieville.
By the way, 7,000 people at Turning Point USA, and even though Benny Johnson said they were met with massive roars and applause from the 7,000 gathered there, if you watch the video, a bunch of people are getting up and walking out as they start to make all these false accusations. So I don't think all 7,000 were cheering either, which also gives me a little bit of hope.
I think it should give us a lot of hope. Listen, I know that there are people, again, that are disappointed in events that have transpired. Listen, Rasmussen has an extremely damning poll. Although in the same time, Trump's approval is 48, 49% for him. It's like, again, like dog years. It's like 90% approval rating. I think there are a lot of people that are scared to speak up. I do. I think there's a silent majority within the silent majority that's terrified of saying out loud, you guys are nuts, or I'm not on the same page as some people might not be on the same page as us. That's fine. That's 100% fine.
We welcome that, actually.
Right. They don't. They don't welcome not being on the same page. That's all we're saying is like, look, I don't understand. Like I brought this up before. My favorite thing about even, you use somebody like Mark Levin, any radio talk show host, they have callers, right? They have a screener just to make sure that the caller's not nuts, but it's never about subject matter for the most part.
You're not going to get that scene from one of our favorite movies, Oliver Stone's Talk Radio.
No, you're not gonna get that scene based on a true story. And for people not familiar with Talk Radio, is based on, I believe he was from Atlanta. I think his name was Alan something, and he was a talk radio show host, and he got killed outside the studio. And that's what Talk Radio by the great Eric Bogosian, who wrote it, was about. There's no interaction, and I don't understand. I really don't understand this goal on this. No matter how big you are, reply to the people that comment. It doesn't even mean you have to reply to 1,000 people. That's a lot. But you look at somebody like Trump, he shakes everybody's hand. He takes pictures with everybody, not just at an event, but on the street too. He'll do it with everybody.
Look no further. Okay, we just saw this play out. Okay, Piers Morgan had on Natasha Hofstorf on his show, and he interrupted her 7,000 times, and every time she said something that sounded like a fact, he decided to kill it, and it was just one of those like destructive interviews, and everybody took him to task for it. It was so clearly an anti-Israel, anti-Jewish bent that he was coming at, that everybody started commenting on X. And what did he do? Didn't respond to one comment, except to insult people ad hoc. He just block, 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 block. When you are doing that, you actually have no leg to stand on. And that's what Tucker does, by the way. Tucker will not interview somebody who disagrees with him. If he does that, he's doing gotcha questions where he's going to edit it or
like Ted Cruz.
But you know what's real easy? Talking. I can talk at people all day. I am a lecturer. You want me to monologue? Get out the way. I'm going to deliver my truth like it's a divine revelation. Welcome to my TED Talk. Here we go. I can do it all day, and no one can tell me I'm wrong. Why? Because no one gets to talk but me. So even if I'm wrong, no one's going to be able to hear that except for the one guy who knows it, and everybody else thinks I'm the one who knows better. That's what Tucker does. He monologues. dialogue is a different thing. That's one of the reasons why I respect Ben Shapiro. It's one of the reasons why I respect Charlie Kirk, because they decide to go out there. And sure, these are incredibly intelligent, incredibly well-read guys who are going out there and going up against college students. So sure, I can recognize a little bit of the hypocrisy, but the idea that they're going to stand there and debate with someone about topics automatically gives them a little bit more credibility than someone who's just going to give a monologue, and anyone who interrupts gets kicked out of the room. Shapiro has a thing. If you disagree with me, you go to the front of the line. I love that. I think that shows huevos, shows some balls. And if you don't have that, like Tucker, it's like the line from Ghostbusters. Yeah, it's true. This man has no dick.
Or I don't know how to follow that up. I know this was a different style show today. We did bring up some news events, obviously. News events that I think matter. I think Hegseth pulling out is extremely important. It shows that he's serious. I think this autopen thing is extremely serious too. I think giving props to Kash Patel, Bongino, and Bondi for the work they've done is incredibly important. I think talking about J.D. Vance and getting to know him or what his views might be is an important subject. But at the same time,
talking about these bots too, the bots are almost the most important thing there because they are controlling the world, and people think, look at how many people agree.
And again, going back to Grok at the Defense Department, that is quite a terrifying thing. Oh, wow, we actually did cover news stories today. On that note, I want to thank everybody for listening to today's episode of the Daily Cheat Sheet. We have a great guest coming on tomorrow. Just an amazing woman, amazing lawyer, Julie Hamill. Go look at her up on X. It's Julie Hamill. She's incredible. She's a fighter, and glad that we know her. So go follow us on Substack, Daily Cheat Sheet. Go follow us on YouTube at the Daily Cheat Sheet, Instagram at the Daily Cheat Sheet, X at TD Cheat Sheet. And follow us on Truth at the Daily Cheat Sheet or our personal handles. Mine is Judah Friedman. Golan, what is yours?
Golan Ramraz.
Golan Ramraz on Truth Social. And we do respond back, and we try to do our best. I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are. God bless you.